HOA tyrant's $2 million blunder? Veteran's deed topples a neighborhood dictator, police at the pond. I gasped, slamming my car door as the cruiser's flashing lights cut through the dusk of Oakwood Heights. My heart raced. Cops in our quiet neighborhood spelled trouble, and trouble always pointed to Karen Petton, our HOA president, whose crisp blazer and badge were synonymous with tyranny. Sprinting toward the community pond, I heard her shrill voice shredding the evening calm, berating someone with venom that could sour the air. What unfolded wasn't just a neighborhood dispute. It was the collapse of a dictator's reign. Kam Siangd, our HOA, a $2 million waterfront empire, and unearthing a secret buried for decades. On his weathered bench by the pond sat Walter Garrison, a 78-year-old Vietnam veteran, his fishing rod steady in hands toughened by time. His silver hair caught the fading light, his eyes calm, fixed on the water's ripples. As if Karen's chaos was just a passing breeze. Karen loomed behind a young police officer, arms crossed, her blonde bob bouncing with every jab of her finger. Her HOA badge gleamed like a self-awarded medal, her pressed slacks and blazer screaming authority. The officer, fresh-faced and uneasy, shifted his weight, caught between Karen's tirade and Walter's serene defiance. What happened next would dismantle Karen's grip on Oakwood Heights and rewrite our community's story. Rewind to 1992, when Oakwood Heights was rolling farmland, dotted with barns and wildflowers, and the pond was a cherished local spot where families fished for generations. Walter Garrison settled into his modest ranch house on 3 acres, the pond marking its eastern edge. His home, with its red-tiled roof and creaky porch, stood as a relic of simpler days, framed by oaks that whispered tales of the past. For over 30 years, Walter's mornings followed a ritual. He'd rise at dawn, pour coffee into a chipped mug, grab his battered tackle box, and walk the gravel path to the pond. On his bench, he'd cast his line, the lures plunk blending with birdsong. The pond was more than a fishing spot. It was a sanctuary where kids learned to cast, neighbors swapped stories, and time paused under ancient trees. For decades, Walter's routine went unchallenged. The pond was a shared gem, its banks worn by generations of boots. Kids skipped stones across its surface, their laughter echoing while retirees like Walter found peace in its rhythms. The neighborhood grew around it, modest homes giving way. 2 larger houses as developers arrived in the 1990s. But the pond remained untouched. Tying Oakwood Heights to its rural roots, Walter, with his warm smile and Vietnam stories, became a fixture, teaching kids to tie knots and sharing beers at block parties. His presence was as steady as the pond, an anchor in a changing world. 2 years ago, Karen Petton swept in like a storm in her silver Mercedes, its purr announcing her arrival. She bought the Goddess McMansion on Hillcrest Drive, with marble columns and a fountain gurgling ostentatiously. A real estate agent with a polished resume, Karen's blonde bob and designer heels clashed with the neighborhood's laid-back vibe. Within 6 months, she'd maneuvered onto the HOA board, charming some with talk of elevating property values and intimidating others with her icy stare. By year's end, she'd ousted the previous president or retiree who ran. The HOA, like a book club band, claimed the title. Karen wielded her presidency like a weapon, set on turning Oakwood Heights into a premier residential community. To us, it felt like a dictatorship. Her reign began with petty rules. Mailbox regulations demanded approved designs costing $300 each, with $100 fines for non-compliance. Neighbors replaced good mailboxes with identical black ones, grumbling as they paid. A paint color mandate followed, limiting homes to beige and gray shades that drained the neighborhood's soul. The Thompsons painted their home sage green, only to face a $500 fine and a repaint order. Landscaping rules required yards mowed to golf course precision, with fines for weeds or untrimmed hedges. Karen's enforcers patrolled with clipboards, citing dandelions or unmowed grass. Neighbors whispered complaints but paid, intimidated by Karen's C. Sanders' letters threatening legal action. Karen's latest obsession was the pond. She declared it an HOA exclusive amenity, valued at $2 million. Its be protected for the community's elite image, imposed a $50 monthly permit fee, and required board approval for access. Permits could be denied for vague reasons, and violators faced fines or trespassing charges. Most residents, worn down, paid the fee, their spirits heavy. The pond, once alive with laughter, became a gated luxury. Its banks empty except for Karen's inspections, where she'd strut in her power suit, clipboard in hand, hunting infractions. Walter refused to comply. Out morning he'd walked to the pond at 7 a.m., boots crunching, gravel, coffee in hand. He settled on his bench, cast his line, and sipped his coffee, content in the quiet. At 8 a.m., Karen marched down the path in her Saturday power suit, heels sinking into dirt. Clutching her bylaws, she announced the pond required HOA approval and a fee. Walter smiled politely and cast again. Karen lost it. My neighbor Janet, walking her golden retriever, saw it all. Karen loomed over Walter, reading bylaws like a prosecutor, her voice sharpening as he ignored her. She accused him of trespassing, undermining her premier vision. When Walter stayed silent, eyes on the water, she threatened to have him trespassed. Still, he didn't move. Furious, Karen called 911, claiming Walter was trespassing on HOA property. Janet texted me and I rushed to the pond. A crowd had gathered, neighbors in pajamas, phones recording, drawn by the commotion. We knew Walter, the grandfather who shared fish stories and beers. We were sick of Karen's fines, $200 for a non-compliant bird feeder, $300 for a tall fence, $50 for a kid's chalk drawing. The pond fees were the last straw. Seeing Karen target Walter ignited our anger. The officer, looking uneasy, tried to mediate. He asked Walter if he lived nearby. Walter nodded, pointing to his house's red roof through the oaks. The officer turned to Karen, who launched into a speech about HOA rules and the pond's $2 million value. Waving a folder of papers, surveys, appraisals, bylaws claiming HOA ownership, the officer skimmed them, his brow furrowing. He asked Walter for proof of his rights. Walter reached into his tackle box, past hooks and lures, and pulled out a weathered envelope containing his 1992 deed, yellowed but intact. The crowd hushed. As the officer studied the deed and called the county records office, Karen tapped her manicured nails, smirking at us like we were fools. 3 minutes later, the officer returned with a bombshell. The pond and a 50-foot easement were never transferred to the HOA due to a 1990s clerical error. They remained under a public trust, with Walter's deed granting him exclusive access. Rights. The HOA had no claim, and its fees and fines were illegal. Karen's face collapsed from triumph to horror, her cheeks crimson. The crowd erupted. What about our permit fees? Shouted Mrs. Carter, who'd paid $600. Can they fine us? Demanded Mr. Lopez. Fine $200 for fishing? Questions snowballed, and Karen had no answers, her folder worthless. She demanded the officer's supervisor. But the damage was done. 2 county officials arrived, led by Patricia Holloway, a no-nonsense woman. Reviewing Walter's deed and county records, she confirmed the pond was under a public trust, with Walter's rights intact. Actions were illegal, and Patricia issued a cease and desist order. Halt enforcement, refund fees, and brace for an audit. The error threatened the community's $2 million asset value, stalling development plans. Karen's humiliation peaked when Patricia ordered her to apologize publicly. By the pond, with Walter fishing calmly, Karen mumbled that restrictions were lifted, her voice cracking. The crowd cheered, some clapped, others laughed, and kids ran to the water, tossing pebbles. The pond felt alive again. That evening, an emergency HOA meeting packed the clubhouse. 3 board members resigned, denouncing Karen's reckless leadership. The remaining members hired an attorney, who revealed the HOA owed $18,000 in refunds with interest. Losing the pond cut the community's value by $2 million. And the insurance company investigated Karen's negligence. Hinting at lawsuits, Walter had warned Karen months earlier, showing her his deed after a board meeting. He'd offered to review county records, but she dismissed him as an old-timer. She didn't know his family owned the farm Oakwood Heights was built on. In the 1980s, Walter's father ensured the pond remained public with family fishing rights. Documented in the deed untouched by the HOA, the local news ran a headline, HOA president calls cops on veteran loses $2 million asset. Karen had collected $18,000 in fees, now refundable with interest. She'd secured a $100,000 loan for pond improvements, using the pond as collateral she didn't own. The state attorney general investigated her for fraud after resident complaints, finding she listed the pond as an HOA asset on loan applications and brochures. Her real estate license faced suspension. At a packed community meeting, the treasurer revealed $2 million in lost assets and $800,000 in liabilities. Neighbors aired Karen's abuses, fining a widow $500 for a mailbox threatening a veteran over a wheelchair ramp. Karen was ousted as president 212-3, and a vote to sue her for negligence passed. 198-17, the attorney said she could face $350,000 in penalties. A shout about state fraud charges $50,000 fines and up to 5 years in prisons. Karen, fleeing, sobbing, to her Mercedes. Walter still fishes daily, his bench a landmark.